At 14, I overheard my dad tell my uncle, "We're putting everything into Tyler. Aaron's just not worth the investment." I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did, and I carried it for 12 years without saying a word. Last Thanksgiving, Dad asked me to give a toast about how great our family is. I gave one. It wasn't what he expected. "My name's Aaron. I'm 26, and I need to tell you about last Thanksgiving. Specifically, the moment I watched my father's face collapse in front of 32 relatives, a golden retriever, and a really unfortunate turkey that nobody ended up eating. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened at that dinner table, you need to understand the 12 years that came before it. And honestly, it starts with a hallway. I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Nice enough city if you like bridges and the vague scent of the Susquehanna River following you around everywhere. My dad, Greg, was an operations manager at a packaging company. My mom, Stephanie, taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary for 23 years. Good people on paper. The kind of family that had a lawn sign for every holiday and never missed a church potluck. We looked like a stock photo of middle-class American contentment, and for a long time, I believed that's what we were. My older brother Tyler is 2 years ahead of me. He was always the golden child, though I didn't have the vocabulary for that concept until much later. Tyler played quarterback for our high school team. Tyler got the SAT tutor. Tyler got the brand new Honda Civic on his 16th birthday, while I got Tyler's hand-me-down bicycle with a chain that popped off every 3rd ride. I didn't question any of it because when you grow up inside a system, the system just feels like gravity. You don't ask why things fall down. They just do. Tyler wasn't a bad brother, for the record. He wasn't cruel to me. He was just oblivious in the way that someone who's never had to fight for anything can be. He'd eat the last slice of pizza and genuinely not understand why I was annoyed because in his mind, there was always more pizza coming. For him, there was. For me, not so much. There were 100 little moments like that growing up. The time my dad drove 3 hours to watch Tyler's away game, but couldn't make it to my 8th grade science fair, where I'd placed 2nd in the entire school. The way my report card got a quick glance and a good job, while Tyler's got a full review at the dinner table, with my dad going over every grade like it was a quarterly earnings report. The Christmas when Tyler got a brand new Xbox and I got a stack of books that I'm fairly sure my mom grabbed from the clearance section at Barnes & Noble on December 23rd. I'm not saying the books were bad. I actually loved reading. I'm saying the thought gap was visible from space. And look, I wasn't some neglected orphan locked in a cupboard under the stairs. I had food, a roof, clothes that fit. My parents showed up to parent-teacher conferences. They weren't monsters. That's actually what makes it harder to talk about. Because when the neglect isn't dramatic, when it's just this constant low-grade favoritism humming in the background like a refrigerator, you start wondering if you're making it up. Maybe Tyler just needed more support. Maybe I was the easy kid and they were just responding to demand. Maybe I was being oversensitive. You tell yourself a lot of stories when you're a kid trying to explain why your parents seem to love your brother in high definition and love you in standard. The moment that changed everything happened on a Thursday night in October when I was 14. I remember it was a Thursday because I had a history test the next day and I was stressed about it. I'd been studying in my room and came downstairs to grab a glass of water. My dad and my uncle Vince were sitting at the kitchen table with a couple beers, talking in that low voice men use when they think nobody's listening. I stopped in the hallway just outside the kitchen door because I heard my name and because I was 14, which is basically a professional eavesdropper. My uncle Vince had been asking about college savings. He had 3 kids of his own and was panicking about tuition, the way every parent in America panics about tuition. My dad took a sip of his beer and said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live," he said. "We're putting everything into Tyler. Aaron's just not worth the investment." I stood there in that hallway with my bare feet on the cold tile, and I felt something inside my chest rearrange itself. Not break, rearrange. Like someone had picked up all the furniture in a room and set it back down in different places so that everything looked almost the same, but nothing was where it belonged anymore. He kept talking. Said Tyler had real potential. Said Tyler was going places. Said that I was a good kid, but I was just average, and that they had to be strategic about where the money went. My uncle Vince, to his credit, kind of pushed back. He said something like, "Come on, Greg, the kid's only 14. And my dad said, "Exactly. He's 14 and there's nothing there." Tyler was already starting varsity at 14. I went back upstairs without the water. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. Not because crying would have been wrong, but because what I felt wasn't sadness. It was something colder than that, something more permanent. It was the feeling of understanding for the first time that the people who were supposed to believe in you the most had already done the math and decided you weren't worth it. I never told anyone what I heard. Not my mom. Not Tyler. Not my friends. I carried it the way you carry a stone in your pocket. You forget it's there most of the time, but every now and then your hand brushes against it and you remember. Oh right, that. Here's the thing about being told you're not worth the investment. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it become the quietest fuel you've ever burned. For a while, it almost destroyed me. My grades dipped sophomore year. I stopped trying out for things. I developed this habit of mentally checking out during family dinners, just sitting there nodding while everyone talked about Tyler's latest achievement. Tyler made the all-state team. Tyler got into Penn State. Tyler got a summer internship at a financial firm. Every milestone was a family event, and I was the audience. My mom wasn't as blatant about it as my dad, but she followed his lead. When I told her I was interested in computer science, she said, "That's nice, honey," in the same tone she'd use if I told her I was thinking about collecting stamps. When Tyler mentioned he was thinking about minoring in business, they had a 45-minute dinner conversation about career trajectories. I timed it once. 45 minutes. I applied to college without any help. No tutor, no guidance counselor meetings with my parents, no campus visits. I got into a decent state school on my own, and when I told my parents, my dad said, "Good for you, bud," and then asked Tyler to pass the salt. My mom hugged me, which was nice, and then spent the rest of the evening helping Tyler write his cover letter for a summer position. I'm telling you all of this not because I want sympathy. I'm telling you because you need to understand the texture of 12 years of being the afterthought. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was just a slow, steady drip of being looked past, talked over, and planned around. Like I was a piece of furniture that came with the house that nobody particularly wanted, but no one had bothered to throw out yet. And for 12 years, I never said a word about what I heard in that hallway. I let my dad think his secret was safe. I let him sit at the head of the table every holiday and play the proud patriarch and tell everyone how blessed he was to have two great sons. I watched him clap Tyler on the back and hand me a participation trophy smile, and I swallowed it all. Until last Thanksgiving, when he made the mistake of handing me a microphone. Well, not a literal microphone, but close enough. And I promise you, what happened next is something my family is still trying to recover from. But before I get there, you need to hear about what happened during those 12 years. Because the kid standing in that hallway at 14 is not the same person who stood up at that dinner table at 26. Not even close. College was the first time I realized that nobody knowing who I was could actually be a gift. At Shippensburg University, I wasn't Greg's second son or Tyler's quiet little brother. I was just Aaron. Some guy in a dorm room with a secondhand laptop and a chip on his shoulder the size of Pennsylvania. I majored in computer science. Not because my parents encouraged it, because they didn't, but because I'd been teaching myself to code since I was 15. After that night in the hallway, I needed something that was mine. Something that didn't depend on anyone else deciding I was worth their time. Code didn't care if I was the favorite. Code didn't care if I was average. Code just worked or it didn't, and when it didn't, it told you exactly why. That kind of honesty was refreshing coming from a family that communicated entirely in subtext and strategic silences. I worked 2 jobs through school. I bussed tables at an Italian restaurant on weekends and did IT help desk stuff for the university during the week. I paid my own tuition. Not all of it because I did get some financial aid, but every dollar that wasn't covered by grants came out of my own pocket. Meanwhile, Tyler's tuition, room, board, and spending money were all handled by mom and dad. I found that out junior year when Tyler casually mentioned at Christmas dinner that dad had just written a check for his spring semester. $7,000. While I was eating ramen 4 nights a week and rationing printer paper. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and said, "That's great, Tyler," and went back to my mashed potatoes. My mom looked at me for a second like she was trying to figure out if I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. I'd gotten very good at not being sarcastic. Sarcasm implies you expect better, and I'd stopped expecting better a long time ago. The real gut punch came the summer before my senior year. I'd been accepted into a competitive internship program at a tech company in Philadelphia. It was a big deal. Not just for my resume, but for my confidence. Somebody important had looked at my work and said, yes, this kid has something. I called home to tell my parents and got my mom on the phone. I explained the whole thing, how selective the program was, how it could lead to a full-time offer after graduation, how excited I was. She said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful, sweetheart." Then she said, "Oh, hold on, your dad wants to talk to you." My dad got on the phone. I started to tell him about the internship. He cut me off about 30 seconds in and said, "Hey, quick thing, your brother's engagement party is that same weekend. You're coming, right?" Tyler was marrying his college girlfriend, a woman named Jessica who was perfectly nice and completely uninteresting in the way that people who've never been challenged by anything tend to be. Their engagement party was on a Saturday in July. My internship orientation was the Monday right after. I told my dad I could probably make the party and then drive to Philadelphia on Sunday. "Probably," he said. "Aaron, this is your brother's engagement. Family comes first." I wanted to say, does it though? Because from where I'm standing, family seems to come first for Tyler and somewhere around fourth for me, right after yard maintenance and that leaky faucet you've been meaning to fix for 3 years. But I didn't say that. I said I'd be there, and I was. I drove 4 hours to Harrisburg, sat through a party where I knew maybe half the people, listened to my dad give a 20-minute speech about how Tyler was the greatest thing to ever happen to the family, and then drove 4 hours to Philadelphia the next morning running on 3 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. Nobody asked about my internship at the party. Not one person. My Aunt Claire asked if I was still doing the computer thing, which is basically the equivalent of asking a surgeon if they're still doing the cutting thing. I said yes. She said, "Good for you," and went to get more wine. After college, Tyler moved back to Harrisburg and took a job at a mid-level financial planning firm. He made decent money, nothing spectacular, and he and Jessica bought a house in a subdivision where every third house looks exactly the same. They had a baby within 2 years, a boy named Gavin, and suddenly Tyler wasn't just the golden child. He was the golden child who had produced a golden grandchild, and my parents lost their minds. Every phone call with my mom became a Gavin update. Every visit home was centered around Gavin's schedule. My dad built a nursery in their house, a full nursery, in a house where the guest room I used to sleep in was converted specifically for a baby who visited every other weekend. When I came home for visits, I slept on the couch. I'm not making that up. I literally slept on a couch in my parents' house because my old room was now a part-time nursery for a toddler. "There's a perfectly good couch," my mom said, like she was offering me a suite at the Four Seasons. "Right, the couch. Thanks, Mom." Really feeling the warmth. Meanwhile, I was quietly building something. After my internship, I'd gotten a full-time offer from the tech company. I moved to Philadelphia, got a small apartment, and threw myself into the work. I turned out to be good at it. Really good. Within 2 years, I was leading a development team. Within 3, I was being recruited by bigger companies. I didn't broadcast any of this to my family because honestly, what was the point? They'd just nod and change the subject to Tyler's new patio furniture. But here's where things get interesting. Tyler's career started stalling. The financial planning firm he worked for went through a merger, and Tyler, who had been coasting on charm and connections rather than actual performance, found himself suddenly competing with people who were better at the job than he was. He got passed over for a promotion, then another one. He started complaining about it at family dinners, and my parents treated each missed promotion like a national tragedy. My mom actually said, with a straight face, the world just doesn't recognize talent anymore. This was about a man whose greatest professional achievement was winning the Office March Madness bracket 2 years in a row. I sat there listening to this, eating my mom's pot roast, sleeping on a couch in a house that had a custom nursery for someone else's kid, and I felt that stone in my pocket again. The one I'd been carrying since I was 14. It was heavier than ever, and for the first time in a long time, I started thinking about what it would feel like to set it down. The breaking point, the real one, came about 8 months before Thanksgiving. My dad called me on a Wednesday evening. This was unusual because my dad almost never called me. Our communication style was basically my mom relaying information in both directions like a Cold War telegraph operator. But he called me directly, and for about 3 seconds, I thought maybe something had shifted. Maybe he wanted to connect. "Aaron," he said, "your brother's going through a tough time with the job situation. I was thinking, you're in the tech industry, you know people. Could you put in a word for him somewhere? Maybe get him an interview." I sat there on my couch in my apartment in Philadelphia, the apartment I paid for with the career I built without a single dollar of their help, and my dad was asking me to use my connections to help Tyler. The son who got everything was now asking the son who got nothing to share what he'd earned on his own. I said I'd look into it. I hung up, and then I sat in my kitchen for a really long time, just thinking. 12 years of silence. 12 years of swallowing it. 12 years of watching them pour everything into one son and treat the other one like an afterthought. And now they wanted me to what? Be the safety net for the investment that wasn't paying off? That was the night I started thinking about Thanksgiving. Not this past Thanksgiving specifically, because that was still months away, but the idea of it, the ritual of it, my family's annual performance of togetherness and gratitude, and aren't we all so blessed? And I started thinking about what would happen if, just once, somebody told the truth at that table. I need to back up a little and tell you about what my life actually looked like at 26, because my family had no idea. Not because I was hiding it, because they never asked. After 3 years at the tech company in Philadelphia, I got recruited by a cybersecurity startup in the city that was growing fast. They wanted someone to build out their entire back-end infrastructure, and they wanted someone who could lead a team while doing it. I took the job, negotiated my salary for the first time in my life, and when they came back with a number that was higher than what I'd asked for because they wanted me that badly, I almost laughed out loud. Not worth the investment, huh, Dad? Someone just invested a whole lot in me, and they seemed pretty happy about the decision. Within 18 months, I'd been promoted to Director of Engineering. I was managing a team of 12 developers. The company landed a major contract with a healthcare network, and my team built the security platform from scratch. I won't bore you with the technical details, but let's just say that when your work protects the medical records of a few 100,000 people, you're not exactly what anyone would call average. I bought a condo in Fairmount. Nothing flashy, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, a balcony that overlooked a park, hardwood floors that creaked in exactly the right way. I furnished it myself, slowly, one good piece at a time. I remember the day I bought my couch, this deep green velvet thing that was way more expensive than any couch needs to be, and I thought about all those holidays sleeping on my parents' lumpy sectional. I sat down on my own couch in my own home, and I just sat there for a while, letting it sink in. I'd built this. All of it. Without the investment. Around this time, I met someone. Her name was Leah. She was a physical therapist who worked at a clinic near my office, and I met her because I'd been having neck pain from hunching over a keyboard for a decade. She told me my posture was a war crime, and then asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. That's a pretty solid opening move if you ask me. Leah was the first person I ever told about the hallway. We were about 4 months into dating, sitting on my balcony on a warm evening, and she asked me why I never talked about my family. So I told her. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard at 14, about the tuition disparity, about the couch, about the nursery, about my dad calling to ask me to help Tyler find a job. She didn't cry or gasp or immediately tell me I needed therapy, which I appreciated. She just looked at me for a long moment and said, "Aaron, that's not normal. You know that, right?" I didn't know that, intellectually. But hearing someone say it out loud, someone who had no stake in the family dynamic, someone who was just seeing it clearly from the outside, that hit differently. It was like I'd been walking around with a crooked picture frame my whole life, and everyone in the house kept saying it looked fine. And then someone walked in off the street and said, "That is wildly crooked." Leah didn't push me to confront my family or cut them off or do anything dramatic. She just started asking questions. Simple ones. Like, how did that make you feel? And what would you say to your dad if you could say anything? Questions nobody had ever asked me because nobody had ever considered that I might have something to say. Meanwhile, Tyler's situation was getting worse. The financial planning firm laid him off during a round of restructuring. He was out of work for 4 months. My parents were beside themselves. You'd have thought the man had been diagnosed with a terminal illness rather than being unemployed in a soft job market. My mom called me 3 times to talk about it, each call lasting at least 40 minutes, and not once during any of those calls did she ask how I was doing. Not once. My dad called again about getting Tyler a job. This time he was more direct. "Aaron, I need you to do this for your brother. This is what family does." I told him I'd forwarded Tyler's resume to a couple people, which was true. I'd sent it to 2 contacts who I knew were hiring for entry-level positions. Not because I was being petty, but because Tyler's resume was genuinely entry-level. He had 6 years of experience at one company with no upward movement and no specialized skills. That's not me being harsh. That's just what was on the paper. Tyler ended up getting a job at an insurance company through one of those contacts. It was a step down from his previous position, both in title and salary. He never thanked me for the connection. He did, however, complain about the job at every family gathering for the next 5 months. My mom would rub his shoulder and say, "It's just temporary, sweetheart." My dad would shake his head and mutter about how the economy was rigged. And I would sit there eating whatever casserole my mom had made and marvel at the sheer audacity of it all. The thing about being invisible in your own family is that it gives you an incredible vantage point. You see everything because nobody thinks you're watching. I saw how my parents lit up when Tyler walked into a room. I saw how my mom's voice changed when she talked to him versus when she talked to me. This warmth that turned on like a switch. I saw how my dad clapped Tyler's son on the knee and called him champ and buddy and my guy. The same way he used to talk to Tyler, the same way he never talked to me. I cataloged all of it, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. There's a difference. By the time October rolled around, I had a plan. Not a revenge plan, not exactly. More like a truth plan. See, every Thanksgiving, my dad did this thing where he'd go around the table and either say something he was grateful for about each person or he'd designate someone to give a toast. It was his favorite tradition. He loved it because it was performative and it always made him look like this wise, loving patriarch who'd built this incredible family through sheer devotion and good values. This year, he called me in early November. He said he wanted me to give the toast. Me. For the first time in 26 years of Thanksgivings, he wanted me to speak. I almost dropped my phone. He said it was because the whole extended family would be there, Uncle Vince and Aunt Claire and all the cousins, and he thought it would be nice to hear from me for once. I think what he actually meant was that Tyler was in a bad mood about his job and might not be upbeat enough to deliver the kind of toast Dad wanted. I was the backup quarterback being called off the bench. But whatever. I'd take the snap. "Sure, Dad," I said. "I'd be happy to." And I meant it. I would be very, very happy to. I just don't think he understood what kind of happiness I was referring to. Leah knew what I was planning. I talked it through with her over the course of 3 weeks. She didn't try to stop me. She asked me one question that I thought about for days. She said, "What do you want to happen after you say it?" And I realized the answer wasn't that I wanted my dad to apologize. It wasn't that I wanted Tyler to feel guilty. It was that I wanted to stop carrying the stone. I wanted to set it down on that table in front of everyone and let them see what I'd been holding for 12 years. Whatever happened after that was their problem. I started writing notes. Not a script, just notes. Bullet points on my phone. Things I remembered. Things I wanted to say. The hallway. The tuition. The couch. The nursery. The phone calls that were never about me. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to be dramatic. I wanted to be honest. And honestly, that was scarier than anger could ever be. Thanksgiving morning was unseasonably warm for Harrisburg. 53 degrees and sunny, which felt like the universe was trying to set a pleasant backdrop for what was about to be the most uncomfortable family dinner in the history of the Morris family. And we're a family that once had a fistfight over Monopoly at a 4th of July barbecue, so the bar was already pretty high. Leah and I drove up from Philadelphia that morning. 2 hours on the turnpike with her reading a book in the passenger seat and me gripping the steering like it owed me money. She reached over at one point and put her hand on my arm and said, "You okay?" I said I was fine. She said, "You're driving like you're trying to outrun something." I eased off the gas and took a breath. She was right. I wasn't trying to outrun anything. I was driving toward it. We pulled into my parents' driveway around 11. Tyler and Jessica were already there. Of course they were. Tyler's car was parked in the garage because my dad always saved the garage spot for him, even though I'd been driving a longer distance. My car went in the driveway. Leah noticed, but didn't say anything. She just squeezed my hand. The house smelled like turkey and cinnamon and that specific brand of artificial harmony my family had been manufacturing for decades. My mom hugged me at the door. It was a genuine hug. I'll give her that. Whatever my mom's shortcomings, she did love me. She just loved me the way you love a plant in the corner of a room. You water it when you remember, and you're glad it's there, but you don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether it's getting enough sunlight. "Aaron, sweetheart, you look thin. Are you eating?" First thing out of her mouth. Classic Stephanie. "I'm eating fine, Mom." This is Leah. My parents had heard about Leah, but hadn't met her. My mom was warm and welcoming because my mom is warm and welcoming to everyone. My dad shook Leah's hand and said, "Good to meet you. Aaron's told us a lot about you." He had not told them a lot about her. He had told them she existed, which in our family counted as extensive communication about my personal life. Tyler came around the corner holding Gavin, who was now 3 and had the same effortless confidence that Tyler had always had. Even as a toddler, the kid walked into a room like he expected applause. Tyler gave me the standard bro hug, one arm, 2 pats on the back, and said, "Hey man, good to see you." Jessica waved from the kitchen. Aunt Claire was already on the couch with a glass of wine that was definitely not her first. Uncle Vince was in the backyard pretending to supervise the smoker, which was just his excuse to stand outside and avoid conversation. The house filled up over the next couple hours. My cousins showed up, Bryce and his wife Courtney, and their daughter. My mom's sister, Aunt Denise, arrived with a pie that she announced was gluten-free, which prompted a brief moment of collective despair from everyone who'd been looking forward to dessert. The noise level rose. Kids ran around. Football went on the television. It was the kind of controlled chaos that my family thrived in because it kept everyone busy enough to avoid saying anything real. I helped my mom in the kitchen because that's what I always did. Tyler sat in the living room with my dad, watching the game. Leah was incredible. She moved through the house like she'd been there 100 times, chatting with my Aunt Claire about physical therapy, playing with Gavin, helping my mom arrange the table. At one point, my mom pulled me aside and said, "I like her, Aaron. She's lovely." And for a second, I felt that old pull, that desperate little kid part of me that still wanted his mom's approval. Then I remembered that the woman telling me she liked my girlfriend was the same woman who hadn't asked about my promotion, my condo, or my life in general for the last 8 months. I smiled and said thanks. My dad found me in the hallway around 2 o'clock. Different hallway, same house. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You ready for the toast tonight?" He looked genuinely pleased, like he was giving me a gift by letting me speak, like I should be grateful for the opportunity to stand in front of the family and perform gratitude. "I've been thinking about it for a while," I said. "That was true. Very true. Good. Keep it positive. You know, talk about what family means, how grateful we all are, that kind of thing." He patted my shoulder and walked away. Keep it positive. Talk about what family means. The man had literally just given me stage direction for his own propaganda. And he didn't even realize he'd just handed me the outline for exactly the speech I wanted to give. Because I was absolutely going to talk about what family means. Just not the version he had in mind. Dinner was served around 4:30. My mom had outdone herself, as always. The table was extended with a folding table from the garage to seat everyone. I counted 32 people, if you included the kids at the side table. Turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from a can because my family refuses to accept that fresh cranberry sauce exists, cornbread, sweet potatoes with marshmallows on top, and Aunt Denise's gluten-free pie sitting at the end of the table like a warning. We sat down. My dad took the head of the table, naturally. Tyler was to his right. My mom was to his left. I was halfway down, between Leah and my cousin Bryce, which was fine. I'd spent my whole life halfway down the table. The difference was that tonight, I was going to be heard from every seat. My dad clinked his glass with a fork. The table quieted down. Even the kids at the side table stopped throwing rolls at each other. He stood up and did his annual opening remarks. Same speech he gave every year with minor modifications. He talked about how blessed the family was, how grateful he was for everyone's health, how this table represented decades of hard work and love and sacrifice. He looked at my mom when he said sacrifice, which I thought was interesting given that my mom had sacrificed for both her sons while he'd only sacrificed for one. Then he looked at me. This year, I've asked Aaron to give our family toast. Aaron, take it away. Every head at the table turned to me. 32 people. My mom was smiling that encouraging smile she gave her third graders during show and tell. Tyler was leaning back in his chair with a casual expression, like he was mildly curious about what his quiet little brother could possibly have to say. Uncle Vince caught my eye from across the table. My dad was beaming. This was his moment. The patriarch presenting his younger son, the one who never caused trouble, the one who always went along with everything, the one who could be counted on to deliver a pleasant, forgettable speech about thankfulness and love and all the things that looked good from the outside. I stood up. I picked up my glass. Leah put her hand on my thigh under the table, just for a second, just enough to say I'm here. I took a breath, and I looked at my dad. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate you asking me to speak. You said to talk about what family means, and I've been thinking about that a lot. More than you know, actually. More than any of you know. So I'm going to try to be honest, because I think this family could use a little honesty. And I want to start with a story. My dad's smile stayed on his face, but something behind his eyes shifted. Just a flicker, like a pilot light that wasn't sure if it should stay on. I said, when I was 14 years old, on a Thursday night in October, I came downstairs to get a glass of water. And from across the table, I watched Uncle Vince's face go completely white. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in Aunt Claire's wine glass. 32 people, and not a single one of them was breathing at normal speed. Uncle Vince was staring at me with an expression that was half horror and half something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd been waiting 12 years for this shoe to drop, and had almost convinced himself it never would. I kept my voice steady. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. I came downstairs for water, and I stopped in the hallway outside the kitchen because I heard my name. Dad was sitting at the table with Uncle Vince, and he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "We're putting everything into Tyler. Aaron's just not worth the investment." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. My mom's hand went to her mouth. Tyler sat up straight for the first time all evening. My dad's face did something I'd never seen before. It cycled through about 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, denial, panic, and then something that looked like a man trying to figure out the fastest way to rewrite history right there at the table. "Aaron," he started, "that's not what It is what you said, Dad. I was 14 years old, standing in that hallway in my bare feet, and you told Uncle Vince that I wasn't worth the investment. You said Tyler had potential, and I was just average. You said you needed to be strategic about where the money went. Uncle Vince pushed back, and you doubled down. I stood there, and I listened, and then I went back upstairs and sat on my bed and felt something inside me rearrange itself permanently. I looked at Uncle Vince. You tried to defend me that night. I want you to know I've always remembered that." Uncle Vince looked like he was going to be sick. He nodded, barely. My dad stood up halfway, his napkin falling off his lap. "Aaron, you were 14. You didn't understand the context. We had limited resources, and I understood the context perfectly, Dad. The context was that you had 2 sons, and you chose one. You paid for Tyler's tuition, and I worked 2 jobs to pay my own. You gave him a car, and I got his old bicycle with a broken chain. You built a nursery for his son in my old bedroom, and when I came home to visit, you put me on the couch. You converted my room into a shrine for your preferred investment and told me there was a perfectly good couch. And you never once thought to ask me how that felt." My mom was crying now, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that's worse. She said, "Aaron, we love you. We've always loved you. I know you love me, Mom. But love without equity isn't the same thing. You love me the way you love background music. It's nice that it's there, but nobody's really listening to the lyrics." Tyler finally spoke. "Aaron, man, I didn't know about any of this." "I know you didn't, Tyler. And that's not your fault. But it's also not nothing. You got every advantage this family had to offer, and you never once looked to your left and noticed that I wasn't getting any of it. I don't blame you for what Dad decided. I do wish you'd wondered, at least once, why I was working doubles at a restaurant while you were cashing checks from home." Tyler looked down at the table. Jessica put her hand on his arm. For once in his life, Tyler didn't have a comfortable response ready. I turned back to my dad. This was the part I'd been thinking about for weeks. The question. The one that Leah had helped me realize I needed to ask. Not for his sake. For mine. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Why? Why wasn't I worth it? What did I do at 14 years old that made you decide I wasn't worth investing in? Was it my grades? My personality? The fact that I couldn't throw a football? What was the metric, Dad? Because I've spent 12 years trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and I'd really like to hear it from you." My dad sat back down. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Aaron, I made a mistake. I was under financial pressure, and Tyler's sports were expensive, and I thought. You thought I wouldn't amount to anything. You said it yourself. There's nothing there. I was 14. He tried to reframe it, because that's what my dad does when he's cornered. I was trying to give your brother the best chance, and I thought you'd be fine on your own. You were always so independent. I wasn't independent, Dad. I was abandoned. There's a difference. An independent kid chooses to do things on his own. An abandoned kid has no choice. And now, 12 years later, you called me and asked me to use my career, the one I built alone, to get Tyler a job. The investment that was supposed to pay off needed a bailout from the kid who wasn't worth a dollar. Nobody moved. Aunt Denise's gluten-free pie sat untouched. The turkey was getting cold. I didn't care. For the first time in 12 years, the stone was out of my pocket and sitting in the middle of that table, and every single person could see it. My dad's eyes were red. He said, "I don't know what to say, Aaron." "You don't have to say anything right now, Dad. I didn't do this to humiliate you. I did it because you asked me to stand up and talk about what family means, and I couldn't do that without being honest. This family has meant something very different to me than it has to Tyler. That's not a toast. That's just the truth. And I'm done pretending it isn't." I sat down. Leah took my hand under the table. The silence lasted about 10 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time until you're living through it with 32 people staring at a turkey nobody's going to eat. Aunt Claire, of all people, broke the silence. She said, "Well, that was better than last year's toast." And a few people let out these shaky, relieved laughs, not because it was funny, but because they needed to exhale. The rest of the evening was strange. Some people left early. Aunt Denise hugged me on her way out and whispered, "I'm proud of you." Uncle Vince found me in the kitchen later and said, "I should have said something years ago. I'm sorry." Tyler and I ended up on the back porch, just the two of us, not saying much. Finally he said, "I'm sorry, Aaron. I should have paid more attention." I told him it meant a lot to hear that, and I meant it. My dad and I didn't speak for about 6 weeks after Thanksgiving. When he finally called, it wasn't to apologize exactly. It was to tell me he'd started seeing a therapist, which for a man like my father was the equivalent of publicly admitting he'd been wrong about everything. He said, "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try." I told him that trying was a good start, but I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine just to make him comfortable. I told him I needed him to show up differently, not just say the right words. Whether he actually will remains to be seen, but I'm not waiting around for it. That's the difference between who I am now and who I was at 14. I'm not standing in the hallway anymore, hoping to be noticed. My mom calls more often now. She asks about my job. She asks about Leah. Small things. But small things are what I never got, so they land differently than people might expect. As for me, I got promoted again 2 months ago. Senior director. The startup is talking about going public, and my equity stake means I'll be in a very good position when that happens. I bought a ring for Leah. Haven't asked her yet, but soon. She already knows. She said my poker face is terrible, which is ironic because I kept a secret for 12 years without flinching. Sometimes I think about that 14-year-old kid standing in the hallway with cold feet and a rearranged chest. I wish I could go back and tell him something. Not that everything would be fine, because that's cheap comfort. I'd tell him, "You're going to build something that nobody gave you permission to build, and it's going to be yours, and when the time comes, you're going to tell the truth. And it's going to feel exactly like setting down something heavy." My dad asked me to give a toast about how great our family is. I gave one. It just wasn't the one he was expecting. And for the first time in 12 years, I went home without the stone in my pocket. Turns out, it's a lot easier to walk when you're not carrying something that was never yours to hold in the first place.